Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is October 2nd, 2023, and let's get to the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? So, it's been over a week since I've made my last update, so I just want to go quickly over the map. And to be very frank with you guys, it's not like many things have changed since. You guys know the reason that things don't change as quickly as we would like to is just for the sheer amount of defenses that the Russians have throughout the front line. And that makes life very difficult for the Ukrainian forces. However, they persist. The Ukrainian forces continue advancing and they continue pounding Russian artillery, which I believe today there was an announcement that for the last week, Russia's lost close to 70 Russian artillery systems throughout the front line. That includes Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk. So the Russians are losing a massive amount of artillery systems because the Ukrainians know that when they lose counter battery fire, Ukraine can advance much quicker. They don't have to worry about missiles flying overhead as they try to advance forward in Russian positions. Now, in terms of Orikhiv, which is where we're going to be looking at first, the Ukrainians are currently pushing on two fronts here. First is Novoprokopivka, and the other one is Verbove. Novoprokopivka is extremely difficult right now. You can see that the Russians have stationed a lot of reserves and defensive troops here, a lot of regiments, and that is obviously making life harder for the Ukrainian forces here. There's been an image that was spread around by, I believe it was the Ukrainian forces fighting in this direction, showcasing the Russian defenses. And this is one that they have recently taken. And I believe it was of this one, these two, kind of just before the entrance of Novoprokopivka, and how heavily defended it was. It was such a deep network. It had a lot of Russian soldiers and BMPs and things like that. It takes weeks to clear that up, including the mines. But they successfully advanced here, and so the Ukrainians are pretty much at the doorstep of the village. Now, we might think that it's just a village, right? But this is one more village less that the Russians can control, and the sheer amount of forces that they have. Again, these are regiments. It's a massive amount of soldiers that they have stationed just in one village. By routing them further and further away, the Ukrainians are degrading the Russians, right? In the beginning, it's always going to be slow, but as the Ukrainians continue having momentum, and I believe they will continue with this momentum even throughout the winter, hitting the Russians perhaps more with drones rather than infantry attacks, it's going to degrade them. And by spring of next year, we could start seeing, the rewards of this rather slow push, but very effective push by the Ukrainian forces. So this is what's happening in Robotine, Novoprokopivka, and Verbove. The Ukrainians are a little bit further away from Verbove, but they're about to enter it. The Russians also have a deep network of trenches here, so it's not going to be easy again, but they're advancing, they're pushing the Russians more and more in the direction of Verbove. After taking Verbove, essentially there is, I believe, just one more large network of trenches that the Ukrainians need to liberate before they can pretty much break through this Surovikin line, this system of three trench lines that the Russians have built, and that opens the door for a lot of opportunities, but that's going to take some time, many weeks, if not months. And I think by springtime, we should see, the Ukrainians to be very close to the Surovikin line of next year. But we never know what can happen. So let's see what's going to happen. Things might be moving much quicker or much slower depending on various factors. So that's the situation in Orikhiv, the Orikhiv axis. Apart from that, Velika Novosilka, nothing really is going on here in terms of Ukrainian pushes. Obviously the fighting is very difficult here, but the Ukrainians are just kind of hitting Russian supplies and Russian artillery here. So it's just kind of a maintenance battle to continue holding the line and degrading Russian positions here. But there's no real push going on in Velika Novosilka and Vuhledar as of right now. In Donetsk region, the Russians are continuously attempting to surround Avdiivka and continue pushing further and further away from Donetsk, which is difficult for them. And the Ukrainians are holding the line here. There's less Ukrainian investment here to have a breakthrough, just because it won't really help in breaking this Russian army, right? If they have a breakthrough in Donetsk, it won't have as much of an effect as having a breakthrough here in Zaporizhzhia. So I think that this front between Vuhledar and Bakhmut is just about maintaining the lines. And if they find an opportunity like they did a few weeks ago, taking Opitne, they'll do it without trying to expand too many forces in the area. Because obviously for the Russians, pushing the Ukrainians out of Bakhmut is far more important than, for the Ukrainians to have these breakthroughs. So far, that's what we're going to be seeing here for the next foreseeable future in the Donetsk area. Now, this is where the Russians are really, really committed and invested. It's between Bakhmut and Kupiansk. So this is their main offensive, is pretty much between Bakhmut and Kupiansk. The Ukrainians, what they're trying to do here is, for the Russians, Bakhmut holds a very, very significant importance. And before the Ukrainians launched their counteroffensive in the area, the Russians were about to take Chasiv Yar. You can see how close they were at cutting off this road and pretty much taking Chasiv Yar. That was their aspirations. That didn't happen because the Ukrainians launched a counteroffensive in Bakhmut. They have retaken Klishivka and Andriivka, which gave the Ukrainian forces the high ground to be able to hit the Russians in the closer suburbs and small villages bordering Bakhmut. And the Russians simply cannot allow the Ukrainians to take back Bakhmut. This would be an embarrassment. Putin has claimed that Bakhmut is an eternally Russian city, just as he did with Kherson, and then he lost it a few months later. And so he does not want a repeat of Bakhmut, and especially for the numbers that the Russians have wasted just to take a city of 80,000 people, it would be a massive catastrophe and embarrassment for the Putin regime and all the soldiers that died pretty much in vain, which I seriously believe they all died in vain, because they're not going to be able to hold on to Bakhmut in the near future. Anyways, I digress on the main subject line. So the main goal here is to draw the Russian forces, draw them into Bakhmut, so the Ukrainians don't have to fight as many forces in the south, right? It's very evident that this is what the Ukrainian troops are trying to do. And if they can find opportunities at taking small villages, they will continue pushing and they will continue threatening the Russians here. So overall, this is a very good position to be in. And that's what I think the Ukrainians are not putting too much importance at breaking through here, right? It's a very slow pace, but it's not as, as fast, I should say, as in Orikhiv. So the Ukrainians are trying to push a little bit, but it's not going to be as big of a push as we see right now in Orikhiv. For Ukraine, the all-in is in Orikhiv right now. This is where they are betting on having a breaking through around this area, and then opening the opportunity in 2024 to advance towards Tokmak, towards the direction of Vulepolya, Polohe, and then eventually getting into Melitopol. I think that we'll be seeing very good developments as the Ukrainians break through here and have a lot of space to operate in. Although it's not going to be as easy because there's still Russian presence in this general area, but it's not going to be the type of presence that we're seeing here. As you can see, the sheer amount of Russian defenses is completely, it's night and day compared to central Zaporizhzhia, away from Tokmak and other large cities. So that's that. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is obviously between Bakhmut and Kupiansk, we have Lysychansk, Kreminna, and Kupiansk direction, Svatove. This is where the Russians continue accumulating Russian troops to push and have some sort of positive effect in their advancement. So far, really, nothing has really changed that drastically. They have taken a little bit of ground just north of Kupiansk, around the forests of Liman Pershi. And they've managed to revert some Ukrainian gains a few months ago, around December, January 2023, around Svatove. They managed to revert that and take positions around the area of Novoselivske. But apart from that, nothing really drastically changed in the last few months. As we all heard of this, massive Russian counteroffensive in the north, where they had about 100,000 soldiers. That's about as far as they were able to do to push. And the same for Kreminna. This is again another front that is extremely important for the Russians. They want to take back Liman. They want to go back into Izium as well, because this is a very important city that has a lot of road connections with other important Ukrainian cities. But that's just not going to happen. The last few months, there's been absolutely virtually no movement in the KINNA forests, as there's just heavy fighting on both sides. And let's face it, the Ukrainians also had trouble breaking through here a few months ago when they had the initiative. But it's just the sheer geography of this area doesn't make it, a good area to have a fast shock and awe advancement because of the time that both forces had to build their defenses here as well. So this is a stalemate as far as I'm concerned around Crimea. So the Russians have been incapable whatsoever of really changing basically the momentum in Russia's direction for the last few months, which is good for Ukraine. And you know why as well Russia started this offensive here is because of how close they are to Russia, right? If we look at Kupiansk, for the Russians, for them to transport their Russian troops from the Russian border into, let's say, Liman Pershi or Dvorichna, let's calculate it, it's 25 kilometers, right, to Dvorichna. So basically, the Russians don't really have to worry much about logistics here, right? Because they don't have to worry as much about getting hit in Russia than in Ukraine. Let's face it, there's still a lot of pressure internationally to tell Ukraine to not hit Russian targets in Russia. So Ukraine has been much more reserved and is just really mostly hitting the Russian troops within Ukrainian, Russian occupied territories within Ukraine. So this is one of the reasons why the Russians have opened the front here. They control a lot more space here. Starobilsk, historically speaking, they have a lot more ground in the north, so they can really have safe resupply routes, and it's generally easier for them to hold this line here. So that's why they bet, and it's smart as well on the Russia side. They've bet to have a successful push in the north, but that hasn't happened. So that's really positive because it means that the Ukrainians are capable of holding the line here, even if they don't have that much troop presence in the north, as they're trying to have a big breakthrough in the south. So that's pretty much the map update for today, guys. I'm really interested in hearing your opinions about what I, talked about, the map developments. What is your outlook for spring 2024? I know it has really changed in the last few months. As you've seen, I was very optimistic prior to the summer counteroffensive that perhaps Ukraine would be able to get to Tokmak much faster, right, within the summertime. I was at least hoping the Ukrainians would be able to take Tokmak, but we've severely underestimated Russian defenses in this area. And obviously the help that Ukraine is getting. So that is making the job much more difficult. So now our timelines are changing as a result of that. If anyone was to say that I'm for sure certain that this is going to happen at that certain date, it would be foolish to believe that. Things always change. There's multiple factors that play into this war. And that's why I'm interested in hearing your prognosis in the comment section. What are your expectations for spring 2024? Do you think the Ukrainians will be able to get to Tokmak by that time? Or do you think they'll still be fighting around the Verbove, Ochere, Tuvate area? I'm just curious to hear your opinions because that matters. And that's the video for today, guys. I really hope you enjoy my update. Again, thank you for your support. It's extremely important that we have a community that supports the Ukrainian cause. And if you have any extra funds, extra money that you want to donate, please donate it, whether it be to the Ukrainian military for drones or other donations that you can make. Do it. It's extremely important. The Ukrainian people are extremely grateful for your help. And that's it, guys. Slava Ukraini.